Okay, shalom everyone. Today we'll start chapter 15 about the Melacha of Boneh, Soter, Demolishing, and Makeh Patish, which is a final um, act in the process of building. So the Melacha of Boneh, building, is the Melacha through which the Mishkan was constructed. The Melacha includes leveling the ground in preparation for erecting the Mishkan upon it, and so that people can walk easily in its courtyard. It also includes putting up the walls of the Mishkan, its roofing, and its courtyard gate. And in terms of roofing, we'll see the famous halacha about an umbrella on Shabbat, which is derived from this idea. So building anything on the ground or in a house or adding anything onto a pre-existing structure is a transgression of a Torah prohibition. Therefore, if one fills in a small hole in a wall or a yard, adds cement or plaster to a wall, or adds water to freshly poured concrete to strengthen it, which is a process known as curing, he has transgressed a Torah prohibition. Any activity that is forbidden on account of boneh may not be undone on account of melacha of soter, demolishing, assuming that there is a purpose to the demolition. So if the act of undoing is destructive, hashchata, it is rabbinically prohibited, and examples of purposeful demolition include destroying something in order to rebuild it more effectively, digging a hole in the ground in order to lay foundation, or drilling a hole in a wall in order to insert a screw. And at times, demolition may be purposeful in itself. In such cases, even if there's no intention to build, one still transgresses boneh. Examples of this include removing extra cement that is stuck on the floor or wall, digging a hole in order to hide things in it, or creating a hole in a wall in order to conceal things there. And we mentioned the midrash about the tzarat habayit, the signs of blemishes of green and red on the walls, and Rashi says that this was actually a blessing because they were able to take off the wall and find the treasures that the Canaanites have hidden inside the wall. An additional melacha connected to building is Makeh Patish, applying the finishing touch. For example, after completing the construction of a house, sometimes there are stones protruding from the wall. They are then often hammered down to make the wall's surface uniform. Similarly, after completing the manufacture of a metal tool, there are sometimes rough edges remaining that are smoothed out using a hammer. So the example that I like to say about that is when we go to make a duplicate of a key, sometimes they shave the metal on the sides in order to make sure that it fits properly into the lock. Both of these actions are prohibited on account of Makeh Patish. Toledot of this melacha include fixing broken tools, improving tools whose manufacture is complete, and installing a window to allow air to circulate and light to enter. And by the way, in terms of windows, we'll see in the next halacha that you're not allowed to remove a window in order to allow air to come in, but you are, of course, allowed to open it if it's on proper hinges and you want the air to flow. But you're not allowed to remove the whole window. There are different opinions in the Gemara regarding whether certain construction-related activities are prohibited on account of boneh or on account of makeh patish. We will not explore these types of disagreements since the primary purpose of this work is to teach people what is permitted and prohibited rabbinically and by Torah law. Making cheese, which is very surprising as far as I'm concerned, on Shabbat is prohibited by Torah law because it causes component parts to solidify and coalesce in the manner of construction, and the same thing would be said about pudding and jello. Making snowballs or snowmen is also prohibited, but since these do not last, the prohibition is rabbinic, and we discussed that earlier in the winter when we were learning about snow on Shabbat. And to remind us that we are allowed to put water into an ice cube tray for Shabbat because it's not going to remain as a boneh, as something that is built, but rather it's just to make other liquids cold, and as long as there's no nolad, is it allowed. As we have seen, boneh includes the prohibition of leveling the ground, whether or not to make it easier to walk on, enable chairs and benches to be placed upon it, or to build upon it. Therefore, one who levels a mound of earth or fills in a hole transgresses the Torah prohibition. So, one of the hardest things for kids who are dati on Shabbat is that we're not allowed to play with marbles, because even if the hole was made in the ground before Shabbat, it looks like you just dug it now, and so for a whole day they have to refrain from playing marbles because of this. If a yard was flooded by rain, one may not spread sand or gravel over it in order to cover the mud, since those materials are normally left in the ground. This is considered leveling the ground, a violation of Boneh. However, one may spread straw that is designated for animal food over the mud, since he does not intend to leave it there. This is on the condition that the straw is spread with a shinui, such as using the back of a shovel to distribute it. Otherwise, the act of spreading looks like a weekday activity. Sorry about that. So I'll just say one more halacha about that. In case of there's an oil spill on the road and it's very dangerous, we're allowed to put sand on it because the purpose is not to add to the road, but rather to just prevent danger. When they cover excrement or saliva with sand, since one who does this does not intend to improve the yard, but only to cover the filth. Similarly, if oil spilled on the sidewalk or the floor, one may cover it with sand to prevent people from slipping. This is on condition that the sand was designated for this purpose and thus is not muktzeh. One may similarly spread salt on ice in order to prevent people from slipping, which is just one more connection to ice on Shabbat. One may not sweep the yard lest he level indentations and thereby transgresses a Torah prohibition. So that's called meshaveh gumot. However, if the yard is floored with tiles or pavement, he may sweep it, just like we're allowed to sweep inside the house if there's a flooring of some sort of instead of just dirt. One who has clay stuck to his shoes should not try to rub it off against the ground because he may end up leveling the ground. Again, this idea of meshaveh gumot. Some are not worried about this possibility and permit rubbing off the clay. One who so wishes may be lenient if it is, but it is preferable to be stringent. In contrast, one may rub off the clay against a grate, tiles, or stones, even the lechatchila, and we have usually doormats for that. One should not rub saliva that is on the ground into the dirt with one's shoes to avoid leveling the ground. If one finds the saliva disgusting, he may step on it in the natural course of his walking, as long as his intention is not to spread it and level the ground. So just one more of our favorite ideas from history. About 13 years ago, there was a woman who came here because her brother died. He was married to a non-Jewish woman, so the funeral didn't take place in the shul. But she told us that she is one of the leaders of a very ancient synagogue in the Caribbean, and the floor in their shul is with just pure sea sand. So of course on Shabbat you would not be allowed to sweep it because it looks very clear that you are leveling the ground in that way. But she told us that once in 2 or 3 weeks they bring in new sand, and then that way they can sweep it up and prepare it for Shabbat. So just wanted to share that, and we will stop here.